You're looking for work. You've sent in cover letter after cover letter, hundreds of applications on every website there is. And yet, you still have 0 responses. Or maybe worse, hundreds of the wrong ones. And on the other side, employers are having the same problem. Too few of the right applicants and an avalanche of resumes making the right ones even harder to find. It's a bad experience and a bad outcome for all parties. Nobody's winning, and the whole process can end up feeling very impersonal and inhuman. Let's figure out how generative AI can help tackle these problems and start to bring the human back into human resources on AI in Action. In this series, we're going to explore what generative AI can and can't do, how it actually gets built, responsible ways to put it into practice, and the real-world business problems and solutions that we'll encounter along the way. So, welcome to AI in Action, brought to you by IBM. I'm Albert Lawrence, and today I am joined by Jon Lester, VP of HR Technology, Data and AI at IBM. Hi, Jon.
Hi, Albert. Good to speak to you today.
Good to see you. And my other guest is David Levy, Advisory Technology Engineer at IBM. What's up, David?
Hi, Albert.
Great. Look, so I know you both are probably wondering, why did I choose you two for today's episode? Well, Jon is the brains behind IBM's current HR tech stack, and David is a developer turned engineer who at his core is a builder. So what better pair to talk with us about how you can use AI for hiring than these two? Because today, I want to talk about HR, but HR is a massive field, right? So let's get specific about it. We're talking about applying and interviewing for jobs. I think that we can agree that it really is hard out there. People all across the globe are having a tough time finding a job. And as I mentioned, employers can't find the right applicants. Is there a tech solution for this distinctly human problem?
I think there's not just one, I think there's many. And I think if we look at things like AI and automation that go across the whole end-to-end hiring pipeline, from job rec to attraction, to evaluation and finally hopefully offer, you're going to try and find the right specific type of AI, Gen AI, automation capability for the right role.
Gotcha. So are you also confident about this tech solution for a human problem, David?
I am, yeah, and it's necessary. We've gotten so far with automation and AI, and generative AI now makes so many opportunities to make this process better for the hiring managers and better for the candidates all across the board.
Okay, so I mean, that sounds like a potential win for both, right? The hiring managers as well as the candidates. I want to break this down a little bit, though. I want to dig into the steps that the hiring pipeline can take and how exactly is AI changing those steps within the hiring pipeline.
When we look at evaluation, this is now that can really offer a lot of value for both employers and candidates, but also has the biggest risk attached around ethics. Similarly, as we go across the whole kind of experience for hiring managers, recruiters, talent acquisition practitioners, we provided a Gen AI digital assistant capability that guides you through that process, gives you prompts, gives you insights, but also makes sure that you kind of stick within the policy. And the next step really is to then say, how do we do a similar digital assistant that can help candidates through that process? Because it can be really confusing. You don't quite know where to go. Having that assistant to guide you will completely change the experience.
Jon, I really love the idea of having, an assistant to help the candidate. As an engineer, it is a confusing process to get a job, and it's a difficult and demoralizing process often. And there's so many different things you have to know and routes you have to take in order to get through the hiring process. Having an assistant that can actually communicate with the candidate, that's, mapped to the data they have on their side, maybe like info about the job role, info about the company, all this stuff put into the responses using something you could use like RAG, or you could using generative AI, obviously, it would be such a huge boon for candidates.
And that's across all different industries, I believe. Whenever it really comes down to you to send those applications on out, you really can feel alone. So it's really encouraging to know that there can be some additional assistance that's really tailored specifically for you then.
We've done a lot of work with similar things for our employees, which is why I think we know this would work, because we have an internal assistant called Ask HR that people like David use all the time. And we're just thinking to ourselves, wouldn't it be great to take that same experience, same automation, same drive for productivity back to candidates that we do for employees? So we're pretty confident it should work.
If the first time you ever interact with a company is the hiring process, and you make something that feels good, it's a comfortable hiring, hopefully you get the offer, everything, you're going to get right in, you're going to like the company you're working for because it started off on the right foot. And I think that's so huge.
The beginning, the launch is so very important. I want to know from you, Jon, where is it ethical to use AI in the hiring process?
I mean, that's a brilliant question, because a lot of the legislation that's coming out of the EU, a lot of the legislation that's coming out of the US around how we use AI with the workforce is really kind of touching on what should AI be used for and what shouldn't it. I think it's worth reminding ourselves that AI is not new. I think it's been around many, many years, but I think what's changed is that Gen AI has suddenly moved AI into the public spotlight. At IBM, I'm actually really proud of the fact that as an organization, we put AI ethics at the heart of everything we do with AI, not just HR, but across the whole enterprise. Back in 2018, we created an AI ethics board that brings together key principles of ethical AI. And I think certainly, I've been at first slightly daunted by this, because I've taken a number of our recent solutions around assistant, around orchestration and automation to that board. And actually, they're there to help. They're not there to intimidate. It's really the advice they give us around things like explainability, fairness, transparency, robustness, and privacy, as well as, I think, a fundamental key principle of we have to keep humans in the loop with AI, as in humans ultimately make decisions about humans. What AI does is augment us in making quicker and more informed ones. I see it now as a real benefit for me to have that group of people there to help me keep on the right side of the law, but also make sure that we do these things in the right way. And I think that's something for me I now massively rely on all of our new innovations around AI, and in particular Gen AI.
So that AI ethics board that you mentioned, Jon, is that something that's unique to IBM, or are other companies also utilizing the same approach?
There are a small number that follow similar approaches. I spend a lot of my time talking to peers in the market, kind of sharing our story, listening to theirs, obviously, because we learn a lot from them. I would say to them, it's a relatively new concept to the majority. And what we say to them is, as you move more and more into AI, and especially Gen AI, this is not an option. You have to bring this in, because otherwise you're going to get people like myself out there going, should I be doing this? Will it match with the latest legislation or not? Should I stop doing something? So for me, it's not something that should be optional in any organization. It should be mandatory for me.
With that in mind, then, David, how does that impact how you build?
I think engineers have a compulsion to make everything efficient and automated. My compulsion to build something would just be let's figure out the most efficient way to go through this entire process. I wouldn't even think of a human in the loop, because if I'm thinking as an engineer, but if I'm thinking as a candidate, that's totally different. It makes so much sense to me. The way I would think about it, I was thinking about it last night, about a big part of recruiters' issue is that they have 1,000 resumes. And so they have 1,000 resumes in the docket, and they have to be who's the best? Who am I going to push forward to the next round? And there's a way I believe you could, obviously use NLP to entity extraction and semantic, all that stuff. You go to machine learning, you start scoring, but that's where we start getting into I believe the muddy waters with the ethics board. Once we start scoring these resumes, and obviously Gen AI could summarize their resume and all this stuff, but Jon, how do we solve something like that? If we just give suggestions to the recruiter, would that pass the sniff test for the ethics board, or how does that work?
I mean, it's interesting, because a number of years ago, kind of back in 2016, 17, we started experimenting with using kind of traditional AI to actually start analyzing everybody's CV and, as you say, score and rank. And we felt really uncomfortable about that, because it was, even though you may still say, here's 1 to 100, a natural human inclination is just saying, it's so great, I've only got to look at the top 10 and figure out which ones I interview. So we are very much led by a scoring mechanism. What we do now is we much more go to assessments that basically tell us, does this individual have the baseline set of skills we need? So we almost use it to knock people out who actually don't have the capabilities. We do something similar around language capabilities. So in certain parts of IBM, in certain parts of the world, you have to be able to speak English, for example. So we use assessments to kind of go yes, no. And what that tends to do is actually drop quite a decent proportion out. Then unfortunately, it is still down to the recruiter to start going through what's left and go, okay, these people are now matching the basic capabilities. How do I now start to rank them and figure out which ones I'm going to pass through to interview?
So even with that, it seems like a human is always going to be an essential part of the loop there.
They have to be. It's back to how David said, how do I question, if I get rejected, if I know there's been a human in there somewhere, at least I know there's been a human-based judgment call. If I just think it's an algorithm, I'm going to go, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't seem particularly fair. What about bias within the algorithm? But B, how do I then go figuring out how to beat the algorithm? Because we're all competitive. We all want to get our CV to the top of that list. And that's where I think some people are starting to think, how do I beat these algorithms? Well, don't, because we only do algorithms that go yes, no answers. There is no inference. There's no judgment in there. And I think when we start talking about inference in hiring, that's where the ethics boards start looking at us very closely and say, yeah, that's not something we want to do.
So David, though, like when you are training data, how do you try to ensure that bias is being removed on the build side?
When you look at training data, there's a lot of methods to try to totally remove bias. And like there's the obvious ones, right? Take all demographic descriptors out of all the data you're using. You don't have their name, you don't have their race, you don't have their age, nothing, right? That's one of the part of cleansing the data. But if you try to get your data set, you have a really broad set of data and you're using from a truly diverse set of people. That's one of the best ways to do it because you have anonymized data, cleansed data, but also a really wide net of data of a lot of different people, a lot of different situations. That's one way to deal with it. It is a really, really tricky thing to fix because there's bias that you wouldn't see. Like you wouldn't see it and you'd have to check, you'd have to audit your training data after the fact to see if there's any patterns of favoritism for any type of biases. You have to constantly be governing the data that you're using, the models that you're using. Otherwise, it will just pop up. You can't really anticipate what it will be until it's already built and then you're following along. You could try your best, but I think governance that's the way to really, really take a deep look into it.
With any technology, we would always test it as much as we possibly could before go live. The thing with AI, now in particular Gen AI, is you have to do even more testing once you're live than you do to get it live in the first place, and you never stop testing. And that's kind of quite a new thought to people. It's almost like we have a model, we build, we test, we do UAT testing, and then we get live. Now it's actually getting live is almost like the start of the journey. So I think we had a really interesting one back when we were kind of experimenting with matching and things like that. And we found that for a particular role within IBM, the people from a specific university always seem to get to the head of the list. and then when we looked at it, it was like there's a clear bias in the programming. And then we looked at the engineers who'd built it and 4 of them had been to that university.
No.
So no, fair play, completely unbiased. There was definitely no intent, but they had built the algorithms based on what they knew to be good. And what they knew to be good had been taught by that university. So, and we only found that out by testing after the fact, by continuously running the algorithms, by continually looking at the reporting. And we caught it, and then we were able to fix the problem. But then we just sat back and went, okay, maybe this experimentation is not a good thing. And then we started to talk to the ethics board. He just said, nope, any inference, any scoring, just take it out. That's not allowed in the hiring process at all.
Right. The funny thing about that is, though, people being concerned that AI might have bias, but these are humans that are still, we as humans, we have our own biases as well, too. So we're working against that with it.
There's a lot of publicity around that bias within the AI, human bias that we build into the programs. But yeah, if you were to just have 100% humans do this, humans are more biased than some of the algorithms we build. So then you get this kind of real challenge that says, actually, maybe if you put the both of them together, you get the best outcome. And that's where we're really kind of pushing heavily, is where you can automate a response yes, no, or knock people out because they don't have a designated skill or experience. There's no inference, there's no uncertainty in there. That's really good because that then gives the humans a less number of candidates to look at, less CVs, and it can speed the process up. It can reduce the time to hire. But I think it's that balance between humans and AI that if you perfect it, will really take us forward.
So this workflow that both of you were talking about, it seems as though it really all does hinge on data and data preparation, because these models are only as good as the data and the continuous preparation that they're actually given. So be honest with me here and with the world that's listening. Do you actually see a world where your resume doesn't just get lost in some black hole once we click send?
I do.
You do?
Yeah, I do. There's automation processes. All this stuff's going to get better. And like, John, let me ask you this. Like, the thought of getting no response, first getting an automated response versus getting a personalized automated response, like there's all these steps that you could take. The worst, in my opinion, the most demoralizing is getting nothing. It's just a black hole, right? Getting an automated response is not much better because it's just like you could tell it's a canned response. Sorry, it didn't work out, whatever. But having the automation tools and having Gen AI and having all this holistic data about the candidate, about the role, about the company, maybe even making suggestions for a separate role that maybe they weren't a fit for this one, but using this automation process, using AI, giving them suggestions for another role within the company, or telling them like, these are the things that you were lacking. And you could do this you could have a paragraph written so that the hiring manager, the recruiter doesn't have to write anything, but they have to just edit it or approve it and send it, rather than just having it all automated. I think that is a distinct possibility. Now, it's a difficult question, like to say which one I would prefer. But I know the one I would never want is just no response. So I'm hopeful and I do believe it.
I guess what we're starting to call intelligent orchestration is where you've now got automation that can actually almost like work with you through the whole program. And you can train that orchestration to kind of look at events or look at timelines and say, this individual sent their CV in on a Monday. By Friday, has anybody got back to them? And the answer is no. Okay, then the orchestration will go back and say, thank you for your CV. We are considering it. We'll get back to you by a certain date. And the orchestration can then look and say, well, has anyone got back by that future date? So again, we can use the automation to really track that individual candidate's process from start to finish and constantly either send communication directly but personalized back to the candidate, or nudge the hiring manager or the recruiter to say, did you not realize this person is still waiting on a response for here? And what they can also do is say, okay, if all the people have replied, what do the metrics show us that we've actually got back to every one of those candidates with an outcome? The outcome may be, sorry, you're not a good match for this particular role, but actually would you consider these others? It could be, do you know what, we are in the interviewing process next week and we'd love you to invite you to that process. All of that's just data. It's data points. It's a defined workflow that this intelligent orchestration can now massively ensure that people don't get forgotten and that you get a timely and personalized response either from the technology or from a human, whichever works.
I got to tell you, I'm excited about this. Like, I mean, look, nobody wants to be rejected, right? Like, rejection really does hurt, but I feel like ghosting is maybe the most hurtful form of rejection, where you put all of your work on out there. This is something that's very personal, and then you just get nothing back at all. So just hearing from the both of you, this idea of not only just an automated response, but something that does feel customized towards like my particular skills, towards other ways that I still might be able to join the company. But that's me from an applicant perspective, right? How can a company actually benefit for that? So basically, like, what's in it for a company in order to put this additional effort out there?
So I think from my perspective, we've got a vision of creating what we call a digital IBMer. This digital IBMer is one platform that includes ad hoc tasks using large language models, process automation through AI assistant, and even program automation or orchestration, all on one platform. What that will do is take the data that we need from unfortunately still in IBM, we've got a lot of HR systems, a lot of recruiting systems. We are massively simplifying that, and that creates this concept of data fabric. But what we do is we have some really key metrics. We look at things like time to hire, we look at things like quality of hire, but we also look at things like time to productivity and how much productivity can we give back to hiring managers, recruiters, talent acquisition partners. And what we've just been talking about, that for me is the big benefit is, yes, as a candidate, you're going to get a better experience. Brilliant. But from a employer's perspective, all of those key metrics, we are seeing Gen AI and AI significantly improve them. And managers now have time to actually do what we call higher value work. High value work in this case is those people that you're really focusing on that you would love to join IBM or any company, spend time with them, reach out to them, talk to them, engage them, make them feel that, do you know what? I, as a person, would love you to come and work in my team. That's that empathy. That's that personalization that we're all striving for. But managers in particular are too busy. David mentioned it earlier. They're too busy to do what they would love to do because they're too busy doing admin. This platform we're talking about around Digital IBM will take a lot of that admin work away and also even give you prompts and insights as to how you then approach that individual, which is going to be brilliant.
And when you think like they would be able to look at the resume, look at the job role, look at all this stuff and give suggestions for questions to ask, like just lead them towards, I mean, obviously the human in this is the hiring manager. She's still there, he's still there, but they get these suggestions that they might have not thought of before. That is very cool, because that would be huge. I mean, just giving them more time to be like empathetic, like just having a personal conversation with the candidate and just removing the tedium from their job. I think that's very exciting.
So a few takeaways here. There are a ton of places in the hiring process that generative AI can help, including job specs and job recs. Your very first interaction with an organization is hiring, so make this process great. It really counts. A human in the loop is critical at all touch points. So get a solution live, but then never stop testing to continue to help preventing bias. Again, I feel very inspired after talking with both of you today. I hope that all of our listeners and viewers feel the same exact way. I'm so thankful that you both have taken the time to be here. So Jon, thank you. David, thank you. This was a fantastic conversation. And friends, that's it for this episode. So we thank you for viewing. We thank you for listening. But don't worry, there's a ton more where this came from. And I promise you'll see us here again soon. All right?